Thank you for joining me for this conversation with Dr. Janja Lalich. I'll just mention, if anybody's wondering about the background here, I drive semi-truck and my truck is in the shop, should be done within the hour. I can be back on the road, but taking a little downtime, a little advantage to work on this project. My conversation with Dr. Lalich, who is a cult expert, and I'll just start off by saying I spent 27 years as a minister in the 2x2 church ministry as a worker. And after, it's been painful, but I have come to the point personally where I am comfortable referring to the church as a cult. And I believe I have good, solid reasons for that. I also realize that is a very inflammatory word, and that is painful, and it may be especially painful coming from someone in my position. And I am sorry for the pain of that. I also feel it is necessary and important to acknowledge that. Along with that, I want to acknowledge that there's a tremendous variety of experience within the 2x2 church. And my experience isn't yours, yours isn't mine, somebody else's isn't either of ours. Many of you may feel you've had a very good experience within the church, and that's valid. Yet, I think it's important to, at the very least, realize and acknowledge that for many, many people, at the minimum, we must say that it has been a cult-like experience, cult-like aspects to many people's experience in the church. That feels important. I myself would have said that my life within the church was pretty good, and there's still much I look back on with fondness and I'm grateful for. But I stepped away from the ministry about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and I stepped away from any involvement in the church and meetings, any of the meetings, about a year and a half ago. And the further away I've gotten, the more I realize how much that whole experience damaged me. And I will be spending the rest of my life healing from my time in the 2x2 church. And that is not to dismiss the deep, loving relationships I had and formed in the church and the good parts of it as well. But yeah, anyway, so I've gotten sidetracked from talking about Dr. Lalich, which is the point. And she herself is a cult survivor. She has spent the last 40 plus years of her life researching cults. She is an author, educator, and support to researcher and a support to many cult survivors. So before we move into the conversation with her, just reiterate this part that everybody's experience is different, and we acknowledge that as I want to acknowledge that as we move into this conversation. At the same time, there is a common narrative these days in the church, in light of all the abuse and problems and harm that's been done, that, well, there's always a few bad apples in any group. And that does not, to somebody whose life has been some of the CSA victims specifically, and others whose lives have been tremendously harmed by the church, that doesn't feel very honest. It feels really necessary to acknowledge that almost universally, there has been a systemic harmful a systemic harmful system at work. That is the foundation of the 2x2 church. That feels important to say and acknowledge that. Now, one thing that comes up, I want to point out to Dr. Lalich talking about her first exposure to the 2x2 church several years ago from a student at her university. And it's important to note that that student at that time mentioned, talked to Dr. Lalich about the abuse in the church. And I mention that because there's kind of another narrative that goes on these days, is that those of us who are speaking out about the harm and abuses, the harm done by the church system, I emphasize the word system. It's not just people, individuals doing the harm. And that we're just kind of jumping on the bandwagon and it's the fashion now and it's kind of a witch hunt. And it's important to note that long before the current crisis broke like a tsunami in March 2023, that people were talking about the trying to get the attention of the church on some very harmful practices. And I've been aware of that most of my life, and I, along with basically the entire rest of the church, have basically dismissed any warnings, any criticism as just people that are bitter, people that are unwilling, people that are offended, people that lost their vision, dismissive in our arrogance. And reading Sherry Krupp's excellent book, Preserving the Truth, I became aware that probably since the beginnings, for a century at least, people have been trying to warn us about some very problematic things, the basic church structure. And almost without fail, universally, our response to any warnings, any cries for attention, has been arrogance, dismissiveness, buckling down, and refusal to change in any way. And that continues to this day. So that's what makes conversations like this one with Dr. Lalich and many, many others so important. So without further ado, we'll move into my conversation with Dr. Lalich. Thanks for being here.
Hey, well, welcome, Dr. Lalich. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Sure.
I've listened. I listen as I drive. I'm a professional driver, so I listen to books as I drive, and I've listened to most of Escaping Utopia, and Take Back Your Life is definitely on my list. I've listened to several of the podcasts that you've done, the talks. Yeah, and I'm excited to see what you have to share. You're obviously have become aware of our group, the 2x2 Church, the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I was aware of it even before the story broke. So
okay, how did you first become aware of our group?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I was a professor at Chico State, which is one of the state universities in Northern California. And there was a woman who, I was in the sociology department. And so there was a young woman who was both a psychology and sociology double major. And I sort of got to know her, and she was born in the 2x2s. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And I was shocked because when she told me, oops, hold on, my dog, hold on, I have to deal with my dog. Can you hear her?
No worries.
Can you hear her barking?
No,
okay.
I can't, but
I'll let her be. Okay. So anyway, and I was completely shocked that this group had existed for so long. Oh, no. That I didn't know anything about it. I've been doing this for almost 40 years, right? So that was really surprising to me, and it made me think, how many other groups are there like this that we don't even know about?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I heard about it, and she told me a lot about it. She showed me photos of, things, and told me all about the gatherings that happen on farms and wherever, and the abuse, and of course, and yeah. So that's how I knew about it. So that was probably like in, I don't know, 2018, maybe 2019.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So like if people want to learn more about your work or hear you talk, there's a number of other platforms for them to do that. So I want to keep this kind of focused. I've already digressed with my first question. I'm going to try not to make any more digressions because I'd like this to be pretty focused and concise. I would like to keep focused on this question, like I've mentioned to you, how to reconcile the positive and the negative, and kind of to approach that from two angles. Like many of us, and I myself, would say we had a largely positive experience in the church. And yet the further the longer I'm out of the church and away from it, the more I begin to realize how much harm was done to me myself. And then, like, another angle is, okay, again, many of us would say we had a largely positive experience, but especially the last 2 years, it's been really obvious that some people we rubbed shoulders with regularly, that we loved, that we cared, had some really awful experiences. So how do we, as we're trying to make sense of our lives, and so many of us born and raised in this, how do you reconcile those two?
Well, I'd say first of all, um, I I would say first of all, I don't think there's any experience in the world that's completely positive. There may be some things that are completely negative, but
Okay.
I think having trouble reconciling that in part is a manifestation of what we call black and white thinking. Like when we're in
Okay.
these high control groups, or call whatever you want to call them, um, everything is black or white, right? There's like no shady areas, right? It's this way. This is the only way. There's no other way. These people are bad. We don't want anything to do with them. We're the elite, all of that. So the longer you're in a group like that, and certainly if you're raised in it, um, that kind of black and white thinking becomes the normal way you view the world. So therefore, it would be difficult now to reconcile that there's both good and bad at the same time, right? So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's part of it. Um, and then the other part is that um, unhealthy behaviors, I guess I'll call them that, unhealthy behaviors, whether it's abuse or just taking advantage of one's power, whatever it might be, um, they become the norm in these groups, right? They become normalized. So
Right.
bad things can happen and you don't even notice it because it's normal everyday stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
either nobody's talking about it, they're turning a blind eye, or it's like, oh, if it's a group, for example, that beats the children mercilessly, right? After a while, it's like, ho hum, this is what we do in our group, right? This is normal, right? And so we become immune to the sort of really emotional, any kind of emotional response to something that now you see as like, oh my God, how could I not notice that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think those are two things that have an impact on that.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because we've had a lot of conversations about black and white thinking the last
Uh-huh.
couple of years. I mean, I was aware of it before, but my wife and some other very good friends have made me much more aware the last couple of years of my own tendency to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I I suspect part of that, the black and white, it's trying to how do I say, like, it feels like it would be easier to distance ourselves from the church system if it could be black and white.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also, I mean, like I said at the beginning, no one would ever get recruited or stay in any of these groups if there wasn't something good, right?
Right.
So
Right.
almost always is something good that is what helps bind you there, keep you there, right? And you use that to rationalize, right? So I'll give you an example of rationalizing from my own experience. So you may know, or people here listening may know, that I was in a left-wing political cult, right? And
Okay.
we were hardcore communists, basically, right? So we idolized people like Chairman Mao from China and Lenin and people like that, right? So when things got really bad, and I was in the group for quite a while at this point, and I was always in top leadership. Because I was in top leadership, I saw a lot, right? I knew the bullshit. I knew the leader was drunk all the time. I knew how arbitrary her decisions were. I was witness to a lot of stuff, which was troubling, but which I couldn't express or do anything about, right? At one point, or many times when things were really bad and harmful and abusive, I would say to myself, well, at least we haven't killed anyone yet. Because, Stalin had millions of people killed and Chairman Mao had millions of people killed. So I
Oh,
would always
wow.
say, well, yeah, this is really bad, but at least we haven't killed anyone yet. And then one day I was with the leader, we were in another country, and she called up her second in command and said, have so and so killed. And I was like, oh shit,
What?
there goes that rationalization. And I was
Oh, no.
terrified. I mean, they actually didn't kill him, but until I got home from that trip, the first thing I did was try to find out if he was still alive. So,
Yeah.
so I think that's a perfect example of what we do to kind of just shut our eyes to the bad stuff and keep kind of making apologies for the group. And part of that is because that's what we're trained to do. And part of that, and I think this isn't true so much for kids who are born in, which is probably most of the people listening to this. But I think for those of us who join as adults, um, after a while, you've invested so much that it's hard to say, oh, this isn't working. I want to walk away from it, right? Because you've put so much into it and you've made so
Oh,
much
yeah. Yeah.
commitments, right? So I
Yeah.
think that also factors into the way people react. And I think it's important to admit that yeah, there were good things. I mean,
Okay.
as awful as my group was, um, I learned how to do public speaking because I was forced to go speak at City Hall or whatever. I was told at one point to start a publishing house, and so I learned all about building and running a publishing house. So that was
Oh,
an
wow.
amazing skill that I learned, which actually, when I got out, I went to New York because I thought I could get a job in publishing, right? A lot of people in our group didn't have that advantage, but I did. And so we do learn things, and I think it's important not to totally shun it, push aside or ignore the things that were good or that we did learn.
Yeah. Because that is another possibility with all the hurt and the betrayal
Right.
to shut everything. Yeah.
Yeah. To just say, fuck this, it's all bad, sorry, pardon my French, but
We're all adults. So
okay.
you do what you do what you got to do. Yeah.
I'm known for swearing a lot, so.
Okay. Well, I've done more in the last couple of years than ever before. So, um,
Oh, go ahead. Go on with your question. There's things I want to talk about, but I'll see if we get to them.
well, um, yeah, I guess like okay. I was increasingly disillusioned with some things over the years, and especially the last couple of years, and it's just like total permission to start questioning.
Mm-hmm.
I am very disappointed. I'm going to choose my words a little carefully. More carefully than you need to. But I'm disappointed with the church and the church leadership, the ministry. And yet, in 2 years, I have not yet encouraged anyone to leave the group. I have my personal feelings about that, but I have not. There's no one that can say, Mark encouraged us to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I've been mighty tempted to, and there's many people I believe would be far better off. But how do you, like someone who is feeling they want to stay? I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Or what are some if you're feeling like, is it okay for people to stay within a group like what you've come to understand our group to be?
Well, I mean,
that's an unfair question.
yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking, but let me just say a few things that relate to what you're
Would
mentioning.
would you say everybody needs out?
Well, if it's a harmful group, yeah, why should it
Okay.
continue? And I can tell you again, doing this for 40 years, I have never, no matter what has happened, I have never seen a group change for the good from the inside. That just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. That does not happen.
No,
So,
no, and it's really clear that will not happen in our
right,
group.
right. So obviously, when we get out, we want to go back and get all the people, either the people we recruited or our family or our best friends or whatever, right? We want to go rescue people right? And I sort of call this the savior complex, right? We're used to saving
Exactly.
the world, so now we want to go back and save our fellow members, right? And that's a sticky wicket because, first of all, and I write about this in my book, Take Back Your Life. Too many people leave these groups and they become an activist too soon, and they're not fully recovered from the experience. They're not fully healed. And when you become an activist too soon, you're going to crash and burn. So I always
Yeah.
caution people, take your time, focus on yourself first. For once you can be selfish and you can focus on yourself and do what you need to do for you to get your brain and your body and your, spirit and everything back in shape. Then you can decide, oh, if you want to do something. But people have this tendency, they either want to expose the group, they want to go to the media, they want to do this. And not that I'm saying these groups should get away with what they do. I don't believe that, but each individual has to sort that out on their own. And so your desire to want to do that is very common. But ultimately, and I think we learned this over the years from when there used to be such a thing as deprogramming, kidnap deprogramming. You've probably heard of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the 70s, when parents like didn't know what to do and their kids were getting recruited into the Moonies and the Children of God and all these groups, and they didn't know what to do, and then these deprogrammers popped up who would go and basically kidnap the person, grab the person, take them to some secluded cabin somewhere or something, and try to talk them out of their belief system. Well, those didn't work in most cases. And secondly, a lot of abuses happened when they were locked away in that cabin with some unethical deprogrammer. So we learned over time that kind of intervention doesn't work. There are sometimes interventions that are more like mediations, more like what we do when we have a friend who's an alcoholic and everybody sits down and tries to talk to them, right? But ultimately it's the person's decision. And my feeling is all of us, when we're in a group like this, and you might say I'm wrong, but I think all of us, no matter what level we're at, we have doubts. We have doubts. Something doesn't seem right, but you cannot express those doubts.
I suspect that. Yeah.
So what I use this metaphor of a shelf in the back of your head. So I say you have these doubts. Obviously, you can't even tell your spouse. You can't say it to anybody. I think the leader's cuckoo, or this is wrong, or whatever, right? So you put it all on this shelf. And finally, one more thing happens that breaks the shelf. And then the person has this kind of aha moment. And it doesn't mean that at that moment they leave the group, but it means they're beginning to recognize that this is not a healthy situation. This is not a good group. This is not a good place for them to be. Then, if they're lucky, they can work their way out, which is going to be different for every person. It's going to depend on any resources on the outside, how isolated you may be, if you're in a country where you don't know anyone, whatever. So what I always advise people, if they're thinking about trying to encourage someone to leave, is to just be kind, be friendly, let them know that you are a safe haven. They could always come to you and you're not going to ask any questions. You're not, and remind them of good things. What I always say, try to awaken the heartstrings, right? Try to sort of tap into their emotions so that they can say,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
this person's on the outside, but they're really not that bad. Because we all have this us versus them thing, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't
Yeah.
know if that answers your question on that, but
Well, it's very helpful. Maybe let me take a little bit different tack than what I'm trying to understand.
okay.
Like it was very common. We were the one true church, and all other churches were false.
Of
So we
course.
wouldn't, as generations went on, we became it. Like I say, about the time I started in the ministry, it was pretty common to say we're the one true way. Then about the time I started, that was shifting, and what it became in time was Jesus is the one true way, and we're the only ones following him.
Right.
So I think things didn't change. They just became more subtle.
Right.
So we wouldn't necessarily talk out against the churches indirectly, but but like, for example, the Catholic Church has been around for 1700 years.
Hmm.
In many cases, it's been tremendously harmful, and yet people are still finding value in being Catholic and being in the Catholic Church. And like I'm wondering if is that like a valid way to consider the 2x2 church? Maybe it will go on for many,
Although,
many years.
I mean, maybe it will, although I don't think the Catholic Church is a cult.
Okay.
The Catholic Church has been abusive in many ways and has covered
Yeah.
the abuse. That's for sure. But, you know, to me, when something crosses over into the cult category, or again, whatever term you want to use,
Yeah.
it basically is a situation where no questions are allowed. You're not allowed to criticize the leaders. You know, everything is just what they want, and that's how it goes. There's no chain of accountability, right? And so
Yeah.
there's no transparency. Where does the money go? Who knows? You know, all of that, all of those things make it not a healthy group. Whereas something like the Catholic Church, which of course there are what, millions of parishes around the world, I guess, and s-
Right.
and probably a good percentage of them are basically benign, right? Now you may have been in one where there was a priest who was sexually abusing the boys or the girls or both, and that was horrible, or you yourself may have been abused and they did cover it up for years, and now it's been exposed, and they're still, in some ways they're still trying to cover shit up, some of the parishes,
Yeah.
um but there has been accountability, and there have been
Yeah.
ways to raise that. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
so I don't think,
And
well, while you might think the Catholic Church is extreme, like, okay, so they say, Catholic Church will say, don't use birth control, right? But they aren't coming into your bedroom to see if you're using birth control, right? But if you're in one of
right.
these
Right.
cultic groups, they will come into your bedroom and see if you're using birth control, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so while the Catholic Church may be very strict and stricter than a lot of other religions, it still doesn't, for me anyway, cross over into that cultic category.
Yeah. And that is fair comparison, because you mentioned accountability, and basically what we've seen for years, but it's been highlighted the last few years, is there is no accountability in the 2x2 church.
Right.
Unless you cross leadership, you will not be held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And there are occasional rare exceptions, but yeah. And another, just on that note, another thing, I think I've become a fan of both Father Richard Rohr and Father Gregory Boyle, both Catholic priests.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very much in their own way bucking the church system, but remaining within the church, the Catholic Church.
Right.
Like, that doesn't happen. That really essentially doesn't happen in a 2x2 church. They're like activism and standing up for what was right and against that faith. Essentially, there were a few times, but in 27 years, it basically didn't happen.
Right.
So that is a significant difference.
Yeah.
There are people trying to make the Catholic Church better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. That's helpful.
Good. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to explain about what we said earlier about it being a system, because I think that's
Okay.
where people get stuck on trying to understand, like, why didn't I leave sooner, or why didn't I go back and rescue my sister, or whatever? Why didn't I say stop doing that? You know, people are constantly beating themselves up about stuff like that. And I think what's important is to understand the complexity and the impact of the structure that you were part of. And so this gets to my framework that I call bounded choice, and there's a book by that name. So the way I see it is these groups have four characteristics: the leader, the belief system, and then what I call systems of control and systems of influence, right? So the leader is this so-called charismatic, authoritarian, whatever, right? And there obviously at some point there was some person, usually a man, who founded it, came up with the belief
Yep.
system, and then
Yep.
other people were named as sort of lieutenants or next level, able to carry out that person's wishes, right? So you have this authoritarian leader who demands all loyalty and whom you cannot criticize. Then you have an extreme belief system, what I call a transcendent belief system, meaning that this belief system is giving you the answer to everything, to the past, the present, and the future. And embedded
Yep.
within this belief system is the requirement that you have to change. You have to go through a transformational process
Absolutely. Yep.
in order to qualify to be on that path to the salvation that that leader is promising you, right? So
Yeah.
that's the indoctrination program. Then you have these other two characteristics, and all of this is intertwined. They all work together, right? So you have systems of what I call systems of control, which are basically the rules and regulations, the really obvious stuff, right? Where you live, what you wear, what you eat, how much you tithe every month, what, all of those obvious things, right? And you have to do them and you have to obey them or you get in trouble or whatever. The systems of what I call the systems of influence, to me, are far more effective. These are the social psychological mechanisms that are used to get you to obey and get you to conform. So what the group is doing is pressuring various emotional responses that we have as humans, whether it's anger, love, fear, shame, guilt, whatever, right? They're going to prey on that. And because you're so guilty, or because you're so ashamed, or because you think you're so bad, and because you think you'll never be good, and all of those things keep you in line, right? So those four things together sort of bind you into what I call a self-sealing system. This
Absolutely.
is a,
Yeah.
this is this is a social system that's closed in on itself, and it entertains no other ideas, no other theories, no other beliefs. There's just that, right? When you are enveloped in that kind of system, and especially as you get older, like for a kid, it's going to be a little different. But as you get older and as you have become indoctrinated and conform to everything, you enter what I call the state of mind called bounded choice. And this is where the whole issue of free will comes in, because everybody always says, oh, well, unless they're holding a gun to your head, you had free will. Like, oh, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you, all that bullshit, right? No. What happens when you're at that point, when you have basically incorporated everything about the group, you become, in a sense, like a little microcosm of the group, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, you know exactly how you are supposed to deal with daily life and what decisions you can make and how to make those decisions. So I'm not talking about, like, there might be everyday little decisions that you can make, like, oh, depending on the group. I know your group was pretty restrictive, but say where you live or if you go to school or not, all of that. But when it's a big decision, when it's a substantive decision, like, can I criticize the cult leader? Can I leave, right? Can I ask where the money goes? You know that you cannot do that, right? So
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely not.
so this idea that you had free will, you actually adopt the will of the leader so that your free will becomes altered and you end up adopting the sort of immorality of the leader, right? And that's why people end up doing the things they do. It's why people end up not commenting on things they see that are horrible, all of those things. It's because you're trapped in this closed system and your mind is basically trapped in that system. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And absolutely. And see, that's the interesting thing about our group. And there's probably other groups like this, but you were totally free to leave our group anytime you wanted,
Oh, sure.
except for the fact that you would go to hell if you did,
Exactly.
or if you overcame, if you were able to overcome that in yourself, then you knew that leaving the group meant everyone you loved and cared about would assume and believe you were going to hell.
Exactly.
Like it's leaving. Like we had this. We like to say, well, we're not a cult because cults are easy to get into and hard to get out of.
No.
And this way is hard to get into and easy to get out of. It is not easy to get out of. It was
No.
most people that have left, it has been very, very difficult.
Yeah, and that's true of most groups, most cultic
Yeah.
groups. I mean, you know that if you leave, you lose everything. Your
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
family,
Yeah. Yeah.
it may be your livelihood, it may be where you live. Um, and you may, on some level, it may be a matter of life and death. I mean, a lot of groups implant these ideas that if you leave, you're going to get hit by a car, you're going
Oh,
to,
yeah. No. Yeah. It was very common, like at these, you reference these meetings on the farms, we call those conventions, 4-day.
right,
It was very common. Like Saturday night, there would be an altar call type thing that we would do. And it would not uncommon at that meeting for the older male worker to tell a story about some young person who didn't join the group on that Saturday night and died in a car accident on the way home from convention
exactly,
the next day.
exactly.
And actually my own call to the ministry, when I felt God was calling me to the ministry 29 years ago, I guess it was 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago. I was convinced on a Sunday at a convention, Juneau, Alaska, I was convinced that if I didn't offer my life to the ministry before I left that convention place the next day, that I would die in a car wreck on the way home.
Yeah,
And if I died in a car wreck, I would burn in hell forever.
exactly.
That's how I ended up in the ministry.
Right. And that, and that's very common. I mean, these groups operate
Yeah.
on fear. They operate on
Yeah.
fear, right? That people are terrified. They may not actually recognize it, but they are terrified. And after a while, you're kind of functioning on rote, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of what's
Oh,
happening in our country right now. That's another.
that's another story. It would be fascinating conversation. I've heard. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying on that. The cult atmosphere. Um, maybe this is an interesting one. Maybe to wrap this up. Okay, when you consider someone like myself, and I don't know how much you've known about the structure. I was a brother worker, a male worker. I was an older, a senior worker in a field, a senior worker out of a pair. And I
Right.
actually, for about 9 years, I was like, do you know what an overseer is?
Yeah.
Like a regional overseer? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was a sub overseer for a section of part of Mexico. So I
Okay.
wasn't the top level of power, but I had a lot of authority, a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously I was participating in a system at a very high level that was doing a lot of harm.
Mm-hmm.
Any what would you yeah, I guess what I'm like, you can't go back and fix things. You can't go back and get people out. What responsibility do I bear? And like you can answer this from a personal thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I got out of my group because I was in top leadership and I was an absolute bitch. I mean, I
Yeah,
modeled
yeah,
myself after the leader and her second in command. It was her second in command who recruited me, who trained me. So, I expelled people, I made up punishments, ran the discipline and control board. I mean, I was like a horrible, horrible human being. And when I got out, I remember saying to myself over and over, like, how did I become this person? How did I become this person? And through therapy and whatever and time and just studying and working through shit, I mean, I realized that even though I was in that situation where I had bounded choice, on some level I was still responsible for what I did. I did do those things.
yeah,
And so I did try to go back and apologize to everybody that I could. Now, my situation was different because our group imploded and we all got out, right? We had our revolution and we overthrew our leader, which was
yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah,
So I was able to go to people and say, I'm sorry I expelled you. I'm sorry I called you a dirty running dog, whatever. In a lot of cases, people can't do that because the group still exists. But what happens is, and this is what I learned through therapy, and this is why people who are in these kind of groups have what's called complex PTSD and not just PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Complex PTSD means that you were experiencing trauma over a long period of time, and that also the harm that was done to you and perhaps the harm that you did to others was by people you knew, right?
Yep.
So it's different. I don't want to discount what PTSD is, right? But if you're a soldier and you go to war, you're shooting people you don't know. It's horrible and they suffer trauma, but they're not shooting people they know. Whereas when you're in a cult, you're either harming people you know or you're being harmed by people you know. And almost everybody in a cult becomes a perpetrator at some point because you have to. It's how the group keeps going, right?
Yeah.
So you have to carry out the rules and regulations, right? So we all become perpetrators. And that's where the complex PTSD comes in. And that's what's called moral injury.
Yeah.
Which means that we are deeply pained and hurt because of the things we did and the things we saw that we couldn't do anything about. And because it was people we knew, it was our family or it was people we knew for whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really important to deal with in someone's recovery from the group, is to either find books on complex PTSD. There are workbooks. There's some great workbooks on that, or find a therapist who understands about that, which is pretty rare to actually find a good therapist, which is why we're actually just launching a course.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that moral.
Yeah. So are there courses? Are there courses available on like on your website or?
Yeah, it just launched today.
Oh, okay. And how do people find that?
My website is Lalich Center, LALICH Center.org.
Okay.
And there should be a graphic and a link on the website to register for the course. And there's also a lot of good stuff on the website. There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
There's a lot of articles and things that I wrote and other people wrote. And so I think there's some really great resources there for people to check out. Whether or not they're interested in the course, they should check out the website because there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So anything else?
Well, I think that's really good for today. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, like, as I look back, I realized there was times I was abusive, and there were, I also feel somewhat comfortable with my time. I think I did a lot of things right. So I'm not in a position, if anybody watching this is worried, I'm not beating myself up daily over my involvement, but I do recognize the harm and the good. So,
and you were born in, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And most people are born in, right? I mean, has there been any recruitment? Very rare, right?
I mean, we say we do. We say we're recruiting, but we're really not. There hasn't been much recruitment at all the last couple generations. Obviously, before then, it was heavy recruitment. It started with very heavy recruitment, but yeah.
And so you are obviously multi-generational, right?
Yeah, third generation. My mom's parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was here in America.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And what is your estimate or the estimate of everybody in this meeting or whatever of how many members there are at this point?
Well, that's a really hard one. I think the most reliable pre-2023 number would have been about 75,000.
Wow.
But there are many regions of the U.S. especially, where that number would have dropped by half. But there's other regions of the U.S. and of the world where the membership numbers haven't been affected much by the crisis. It's been nobody's been told what's going on. The information control, discouragement from finding out what's been happening.
Yeah, the damage control.
So, I don't. 50,000 is.
And is the biggest membership here in America?
Yeah, definitely. U.S. and Canada.
Okay.
There's some other countries. It's been very, very high, good number successful, like in the Philippines, in Korea, India,
Wow.
South Africa, I believe. I think our ministers have been in well over 100 countries. I
So
mean, it's
it's like the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses who are very
well number.
big
Yeah,
on going to these other countries to recruit.
yeah. And so recruitment in other countries has continued even when it tailed off in the U.S. in North America, U.S. and Canada, for sure,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
English speaking world.
Have there been any like top leaders who have repented or whatever since all of this broke?
I
Other than
would say there was one who in the beginning did acknowledge the faults, but has basically, as near as I can tell, chosen the system over any kind of meaningful change. So I would basically the short answer to that is, as far as I can tell, no.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's kind of staggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the narrative is so strong that this way was created by God, and
Yeah.
man doesn't have any power to change what God created. If you believe that,
Yeah. You're screwed.
there's only one course of action. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope this has been helpful.
I think it's going to be very helpful. It's been helpful for me. I think it's going to be helpful for the viewers too.
Good. Good. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
We're just, yeah, I mean, we're all just trying to make sense of life.
yeah, exactly.
It's just,
Yeah.
none of us, I said from early on in this crisis, there's not a single one of us, wherever you come from before you come to this earth, not a single one said, hey, I could go down and do that human thing really well. Send me to be one of those. Like none of us signed up to be human. We're
Yeah.
just trying to figure it out. So
Yeah. Well, I wish everybody well. And I
yeah, thank you.
hope everybody finds the resources they need and just focuses on their own recovery and healing. And I just want to say to people that and you probably all know this already, but it is a roller coaster, right? It's going to be ups
It
and
is.
downs. There's going to be
Yeah.
times when you want to, that's all you want to deal with. And then there's going to be times when you just don't even want to think about it. That's all normal. Just go with the flow. Right.
Yeah. And we had some of the other administrators had set up a conversation with Dr. Hillary McBride about a month ago. I think her latest book is Holy Hurt. She's, fascinating resource for not so much focused on cults, but spiritual and religious trauma in general.
Uh-huh.
She's done a ton of research in that. But anyway, she very explicitly gave us all permission to take many years to recover.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been out since 1986. So what is that? 40 years? And I still occasionally have nightmares. That I'm trapped somewhere or I'm with the leaders or, I mean, these experiences go very, very deep. So,
Well, that's both depressing and hopeful.
yeah. I mean, the difference is that, in the past when I had these nightmares, I'd wake up and I'd be depressed and now I go, oh, shit, another one of those nightmares. It's like,
right.
Doesn't have the same impact. So,
Yeah. Well, and on that note, I know there are victims of severe abuse that will have debilitating nightmares their whole life.
Right.
That's kind of a different level that we're talking about there. But thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I need to run because I have a TV interview in a few minutes. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks for all you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. Thank everybody. We all do what we can do. So.
Okay.
All right. Ciao.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.